Gonna get hard. That exactly is a few examples to just kind of make it realistic. Specifically, what that allow things like fracking, perhaps allow things like lumber, because of the environment, possibly less regulation, air pollution that are on fishing. Those are the things that we think that these things are fairly simple. And that from these things, we'll get more jobs. If government positions want to attack us on that, we say the following thing. Obviously, that when you create these more big factories, options for fracking, things that people have more jobs so they can create more income for the government, which is another good thing that trickles down to people's pockets. They can, for example, tax more that are doing fracking, things like that. And this money finds its way towards the people's pockets, whether it's welfare or then later taxation cuts people. Sorry, can we be quiet outside? Thank you. Okay. So what is the most important? I think the most important thing in this debate is to have as large of a chance for a democratically elected president to be elected in the next election. Why do we think so? Firstly, the comparative is Donald Trump. Shall I say more? No, I will. Okay, but we think that the Democratic governments at the end of the day care more for their have a higher likelihood of actually caring for immigrants, a better welfare and health care. We think that the overall the political Trump's government has been seen to be quite ineffective and quite problematic. That on the comparative Democratic government. Why does Donald Trump still have a large chance of winning the elections, and how do we change this in our favor? Because first we say that just what happens is the current president tends to win again, right? He already has a 4 on the president that's going on the elected candidate that's going again, right? That can be part of the things that he has done. He's already shown himself, and people tend to just. Second, has taken steps to actually procure a lot of parts of the believe in what he has done. He has hit on immigration. He has a economy that he promised. Overall, people in the Republican sector are pretty happy with it. That I also think that the Democrats don't actually have a strong enough, a very, very strong opponent. So we think because a lot of the opponents now are split, people are splitting between candidates on what they want. And we think that the biggest that what's going to happen is that Bernie Sanders is not going to win, not going to be elected as the candidate, and that Biden is. Biden just falls again into the same problem that the Democrats had the years before, when the establishment doesn't really center well to the middle, low-class Americans, Rust Belt, and these areas. How do we change all this thing, and what is the most important thing in the debate? What is the one thing that gives the Democrats the ability to perhaps win the next elections? The idea is the following thing. need them to take drastic measures to be able to win over this, the states that are like swing states. That's how we call them, right? Swing states. Those states, the one thing that is extremely characteristic of them is that they have high unemployment that is usually caused because of that they were used to be reliant on certain industries, a lot of energy industries that today are not allowed because America is going more towards green energy. What do we think that these say that these were the exact countries, these states, the exact reason why Hillary, even getting most votes, did not actually win the real election. Say that in those areas they don't have jobs because they cannot do fracking, they cannot do coal mining like they used to. We say that this is devastating towards these cities. Where we say that the worker, the middle class, kind of lower probably class worker, when they lose their jobs, they lose a lot of their dignity. They lose what makes them wake up in the morning to get out of bed, what makes them feel as if they're being able to care for their family. It's wage and the money that they get opens opportunity for everything that they want to be able to buy. I don't want to talk too much, but a lot of us have never felt what it means to not actually have the money to buy basic things that you need, because most of us, I think, have good retirement. These people for years have suffered from not actually having jobs. What we say is the following thing. It's important to, even if we don't at the end follow through, notice, on the proclamation. It's important to make this proclamation that we are willing to actually cater to their needs by actually allowing us to continue to. Why? One second. We say that when the problem is that these don't believe that the Democratic Party cares for them because they're not willing to give them back the original jobs in these areas. We say that when we important thing, and these people are very likely to change the way they vote and vote for the Democratic Party. These swing states is the reason that these the voting candidates are chosen. Change these swing states, we do it. Notice the most important thing in this. It's the proclamation of what is happening. Why? Because when I'm proclaiming that I care for you guys enough to let go of some of the things, critical things that I have been campaigning for all this time, it shows commitment towards these specific citizens. It shows them that the Democratic Party is willing to give up on things in order to fight for them and to help them. And this is critical, and this is what they are looking for. Yes, open it. You think that what happens is that when the Democratic Party now has a little extra stuff the Republican Party has not given them, and now is telling them the same thing, obviously it's better to vote for the Democratic Party, right? We think that when we talk about the swing states, then if we then once both two parties cater to the most important things for the swing states, then it comes down to other things afterwards. And we think that given that the Democratic Party gives better ideas for welfare, better ideas for income equality, they're likely to fall into the Democratic Party anyway. Then we say that it is another thing that they do not respond to is how strong this commitment is, because again the Democratic Party is giving up on certain values to actually say that this is a very strong commitment, and that's something that is important for these. We say that the most important thing in this debate is to actually be able to have a Democratic president, because we think that what has happened in the past few years in America is quite controversial and problematic. And for these reasons, we want to give the Democratic Party the most chances to win this. We show you how we do this, therefore we're very proud to support.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome the Leader of Opposition to open their debate.
okay, we're going to prove in opening opposition how the Democratic Party has more possibility of changing how the world is working in the environment than in the employment, and secondly, that the environment is more important in general in a fair comparative than the employment. But before, that's dealing with the case of opening government. Four rebuttals to the real extreme case in which they are trying to pretend that changing this is going to enable them to win the elections to the Democratic Party. First of all, I think that it's unclear in this in opening government what that is going to be more important that we're going to prove in opening opposition, which is that the environmental harms are worse. I mean, if the war is worse because the environment is going worse, I don't think why being a democratic president is going to be this better. Secondly, we think that this unclear how this is going to affect the elections. We saw in past election how Trump polemics are like the main focus of the election. That's what people look when they vote. So we do not think that saying that you are going to do fracking in a couple of places is going to change it. But thirdly, and most importantly, we think that putting the focus of the election in employment, it's an awful idea for the Democratic Party for two reasons. First, because this is the best card of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has put some protectionism policies in the economy, which probably are very bad in the long term, but that in the short term are working pretty well in the employment. And the proof of this is that the unemployment is under the 3%. They are in records in the best in the history of the United States on terms of unemployment. How are you going to fight the narrative of unemployment when you have the president which has put the best rates of unemployment in the history of the United States, or at least of the past 30 years. I think if you put the focus there, he's going to claim that he's winning that point, and therefore he's going to beat you. But secondly, even also more important, is that all the things that they are saying are also, are also being proposed by the Republican Party. How do you know that? Because Trump gets a shit about the environment. He goes out of Paris Agreement. He's willing to do whatever to help America, because you know, America first, fuck the world, fuck the future generation. What we want is to put the economy of the United States in front. All these things they're saying, put more fracking, put more things like that, are already proposed by Republicans, and they are doing this right now. So I don't see how a voter is going to say, okay, they say that they're going to do this, but the other party is also saying that, and is doing this in the status quo, but I think that clearly they are going to prefer to vote Trump. We think that putting the focus in the best part of the presidency of Trump is probably going to lose the election for the Democratic Party. Now, first point of opening opposition is how the delta of the Democratic Party in order to change employment is really low in comparative with the environment. First of all, because employment is already really low. They are in 3%. In the history of the United States, the employment has been like between 3 and 9%. It is in the lowest part. It is really difficult to put this even farther lower, so therefore it is really difficult to make it go even lower. Secondly, because we think that the economy of the United States is like with a really low public sector. That means that the influence of the government in the economy is at a certain point tight, and they cannot like do whatever they want as in Communist Party or in some places of Europe with a really interventionist government. Therefore, we think that their ability to interact is not so big. And fourthly, we think that many things of the economy are in hand of states which are already governed by in the status quo governed by the Republican Party, and therefore they don't have the ability to put that in place. On the other hand, in the environmental, we think that they can do easy things which can change this dramatically. First of all, because just to join the Paris Agreement again, just to put the limit of pollution in the air, not in 100 but in 80, you are putting like a real net benefit on the ground. And secondly, and we think that this is important because it's much more likely that they gain this battle and they pass legislation. Now they have the control of the Congress and they can gain the control of the Senate. It is really unlikely that they are going to convince Republican senators and Republican congressmen to go against the economic policy of Trump. But it is really likely that some of them, for example, George Bush said this publicly, they are in favor of protecting the environment, and therefore they can convince some of them to vote with them and to therefore damage the Trump presidency and at the same time approve some policies of reducing pollution. Now, why is more important? No, thank you. Why is more important environment than employment? We have 4 points here. First point, because it is more long-termism than unemployment. We think that in the status quo in the United States, unemployment is really short because it's in 3%, and you in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years are going to get employment. But in the other hand, the effects of the environmental change is affecting the health of the people, which is for the long term. We say that things like the probability of cancer have doubled in the past 20 years because of the pollution in the air. It's something that is going to affect you forever, where once you have this illness, and therefore therefore it's something that you cannot solve. Secondly, we think that the effects are harder because the unemployment in the United States is not killing you, it's putting you in a bad situation, but we think that in a rich country like the United States, through family connections, you are not going to starving, you are going to have not such a good life, but you are going to survive. But on the other hand, no thank you, the environmental damage is for your health, and it's going to or kill you or damage your ability to continue having a good life. Thirdly, we say that the damage that you receive when you are unemployed is reversible. That means in a couple, 3 years, you are going to have unemployment and your life is once again as good as it was to be. But the damages that we are describing in opening opposition from the environment are not going to come back because, when you have cancer, probably you are not going back. But secondly, because the damage to the pollution and to the air is really difficult to go low once you are putting it high. Yes, closing.
Yeah. Next year, how do you fix this?
Well, first, I don't think so. I think that's really a really unlikely thing to happen. But secondly, we think that this not like automatization is not in the same level that environment. I think that they can go further at the same time. And fourth comparative, we think that this is going to affect to more people than employment. Unemployment is affecting the people which is unemployed and their families, which, as I said, is just a 2 or 3% in the United States. But on the other hand, the environment is affecting not only the whole population of the United States, but rather the whole world, because the pollution is transactional and it affects the whole planet. We think that the people of Africa, of Asia, have nothing to do with the pollution of the United States, but rather the West is putting all this pollution in the world, and they are affecting a lot of people. In addition, with this pollution, we are affecting all the future generations which are going to happen in the future, which means that many people which have nothing to do with this decision of the Democratic Party is going to have worse air to breathe in the future because of this decision, and we think that because of this vast majority of people is going to be affected, we also are going to oppose. We think that they are not winning the election, but even if they are winning the election, they have to prove why is that such an important thing that they can trade off the world's world which we are presenting in the opening opposition. We are very proud to be in opposition.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay? Here is why I lose this debate. If the Democratic Party does not get elected and the Republican Party gets elected, they get none of their environmental benefits that they wanted to claim. You get nothing, don't get a return to the Paris Accord. You don't get a reversal of all the things that they're having within factories. You get nothing of that. Our case is simple. It is better to give up that in order to gain everything else the Democratic Party does so well, and to prevent the massive harm that the Republican Party does. I'm going to do two things. A, discuss again our reasons why specifically it is crucial for the Democratic Party to get elected. Then talk about why it is actually, might be, irrespective of that, in the duty of the Democratic Party. Let's start. They told us that we cannot compete with Donald Trump on overemployment. Here is a few things. Note that the Democratic Party offers a lot of stuff that workers actually really like, such as welfare, such as free healthcare, and everything that someone from a low income would actually want to have. What is the problem there? When they think that the Democratic Party is going to reverse everything that Donald Trump might have done, everything that gave them a job, shut down their factory or their industry because of environmental reasons, therefore they will be unemployed, they're very, very unlikely to ever vote for the Democratic Party. We say that when the Democratic Party says that we aren't going to do all this kind of thing, then it becomes a balance. Yes, some of them might still vote for Donald Trump, but a lot of them won't. A lot of them actually like a lot of the stuff that the Democratic Party has to sell. We think that is crucial because the elections are decided specifically on these swing people, specifically on swinging these kinds of states that Daphne has talked to you about, specifically swinging these low working class that have won Donald Trump the last election. What else do we say there? We say the following thing. It is problematic that the narrative that is happening in the US is the Democratic Party, is the party that is anti-worker, the party that prioritizes amorphic things, stuff that workers on the ground do not care about and take their jobs away. How does it happen? The main campaign of Donald Trump was focused around elites, was focused around liberals and the damage that they actually do. And for an average worker, this actually has some merits, right? Because the Democratic Party is willing to take away your job for amorphic benefits, for benefits that benefit maybe the whole world, for a cleaner environment that you do not yourself do not grasp, but it affects a lot of the time people elsewhere and not you, to take away your livelihood, your dignity, and your ability to sustain yourself. We say then this falls directly into the campaign of Donald Trump. This is why Donald Trump was able to sway specifically these people. We say we need to reverse that. We need to give the clear message that the Democratic Party is here for you, the worker, the average person on the street. And we're here for you in many ways. Some of them have stated that the Republican Party is not. We are willing to give you free healthcare. We are willing to give you healthcare. And we are also willing to keep your job intact. This is so crucial in order to sway this kind of people. No, thank you. This is specifically how it happens. We make then the connection of the Democratic Party as a friend of the working class. Maybe it will not sway everyone. It will sway quite a lot of people. It's enough for us to win the election. Let's reiterate the damage of that. Because we are probably under the best side of opposition here, giving up on some chances that we will win the election, all of these environmental benefits, because maybe there is a chance that they will. We say it is a small one and we need to improve the chance and actually have a plausible chance to win, but maybe. What is the massive damage that is happening? The massive damage that is happening is Donald Trump is ruining the United States foreign relationship. Donald Trump is actually ruining a lot of the global trade and the global economy. Donald Trump is ruining stuff like the WTO. Donald Trump is ruining the relationship between the US and its minorities and its immigrants. Donald Trump is separating families at the border of the United States. We think it is something that is unacceptable under this debate. And not only Donald Trump, because maybe they say, oh, but this motion happens in the long term. I think that this is stuff. This is the Republican Party that you actually see now. The Republican Party is always going to be tough on immigration. The Republican Party is always going to be pro-Christian and again against this kind of minorities. We have to avoid this. I'm happy to take about closing. Okay, we think of following a few things. A, they are likely to see that as a narrative of the success. You are correct. That the Democratic Party actually listening to the will of the people and actually changing their policy in compliance to what the people actually want and actually do. They are going to say that as the Democratic Party is actually listening to us for the first time in its existence. We think that is something that is very, very good. Secondly, you tell us they are untrusting of the system. We think as we have started this debate, this system of the Democratic Party actually provides very tangible benefits for these people. We think specifically when Donald Trump rhetoric can no longer say that the system is screwing you over and it's a specific change that we are making, it's much more likely on our side. Let's then discuss, in complete disconnect from everything you just said, why it's actually in the role of the Democratic Party to prioritize that, even if you don't buy anything that we have said thus far. Because what are the harms that they bring? They're bringing harms about some harms to health, some harms of global warming, and some harms to the future generation. What's coming from the opening position. Think a few things. I think that first of all, it's very, very crucial for the Democratic Party as a party of the people, voted by the people that are currently standing to actually care of the people. Yes, global warming has, as the name implies, global harms. We say that the Democratic Party should care about that less than the actual situation of the individual American worker on the street. Actually care about less of the individual state of the American family. We say that but they say there is health issues. So health issues are so minor in this debate in comparison, because the chances are actually small that you actually get some sort of infection because of some sort of specific pollution, in comparison for thousands of people actually losing their jobs. And they say, but you're only employed for 2 or 3 years. No, when you're unemployed, specifically in the US, you are unable to pay for healthcare because the system is fucked. You are unable to pay for a lot of stuff. You are unlikely to get yourself into debt. You are unlikely to send your kids to school because the system is so bad. Unemployment is a huge, huge deal within the US. We think that we need to prevent people from actually being unemployed. We say that the Democratic Party should care about these people. And it should care about these people even above the future generation, because these are people that are voting for the Democratic people. These are these are people that actually give it its mandate. We are so happy to propose the motion.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Very important to understand that in this debate, the Dems are only quitting of those social policies that are in direct harsh with the environment. They can offer social standards. They can offer many of the things related that OG wanted to offer without doing a harsh to the environment. All of those policies, we're fine with them. We're just telling you, in those occasions in which they directly clash with the environment, it is stupid to do it, and they shouldn't do it. Two questions in this speech. First, what's preferable to the Dems in order to win? And second, why do we care, even if they didn't win, on why the policies are more important in the environment? First, on winning or losing by the Dems. We think that the Dems are not likely to win just on the narrative of job creation due to several reasons. First, because Trump and the Republican Party has been historically very useful in this narrative. There is a low ratio of employment due to Trump's policies in the US, historically in at 2.53% in the past quarter. The level of employment that right now the US has is very structural, and probably you can't change it by the policy they say. But most importantly, they have basically no delta when the other party is already offering this. So they're already offering to do this. When you also offer this policy, basically you have no difference, and there's no reason why you strip the vote to another party if party X had already offered that. On the comparative, they have a competitive advantage when they offer things that are related to the environment. Why is this true? A, because they're able to capitalize the harms caused by Trump's in these exact points, which are a worry to many people. They're also able to capitalize the narrative of anti-Trump policies and to do things and undo things that Trump already did. This will enact and permit to mobilize many part of the Dems electorate which were not mobilized in the previous elections, and that is capital to this debate. Because the Republican voters they claim will vote for Democrats are not voting for Democrats anyhow. The ones who could have voted Democrat is those who weren't mobilized in the past elections and would be mobilized if they capitalized this anti-Trump narrative based not on the things Trump had done good, like employment, rather on the things that harm America, not for this generation, but for many generations. We beat them in this very metric on who wins because we think it's much more easy when you capitalize the narrative against Trump, rather when you copy a strategy that has gone very good for Trump. But even if, no, framing, why do we think that it's irrelevant whether Dems win or lose if they apply this concrete policy they're claiming? It is not good or bad in and of itself to have a Democrat or a Republican in the White House. It is good if the policies that they apply are good. What we tell you, if the Dems arrive to the US presidency and apply the kind of policies that they're saying, we are against them getting to the White House in the first place. It is likely that if they get to the White House through these policies, they'll comply with these policies. So if they get to the White House due to this reason, probably they'll enact these policies where it's against the environment. And we tell to you that it's not important to arrive as a Dem, but rather to apply the right policies. So regardless who wins, what do we believe is that the Dems apply policies which are complying to the environment. Whether they win or not, it will more likely that we care about the most important thing in this debate, which is the environment and not the jobs of the United States. Let's compare those two things. Which is more important, to have policies that go for employment or policies which go to the environment? No. There's two ways in which you can compare this. The first is the degree of irreversibility of the harm you are causing if you prioritize one of the other. The harms to the environment are most likely to be resources that cannot regenerate. When you deforest a forest in Arizona, it is likely that you get 80 to 90 years to reforest that forest again. Most importantly, the iterations of this are probably uncontrollable. The fact that you don't have those 100,000 trees in Arizona are not controllable, as in probably oxygen will not be generated, hence is less CO2 absorbed from the atmosphere. Most of the things that they are doing are not iterable. They can't control the damage that is happening on the long term. This is key, because whatever damage you cause to the unemployment market, even if you put it from 3 to a 5, it's reversible. How do we know that is true? First, history in the United States. But secondly, and most importantly, because when we deal with the climate thing, we can find policies that are more likely to get more employment and are reversible. So we think that is the first way you can compare. The second way you can compare is the impact to the life of the people. It is true that being unemployed is shit. It is bad. But you can always complement that. You can always give subsidies. You can always do things to get those people better. What you cannot do is tell those of 1/3 people in the United States that this year were diagnosed with asthma due to things related to the environment and the degree of CO2 that you're going to cure that asthma. Because most of the impacts for the personal lives in the environment are irreversible and impact the life of the people, not for this generation, but forever. We think that those two metrics, irreversibility and impact for their people, it is much more important to have these kind of policies. Why do we believe that we have more policies of this kind, whether they win or they lose? If they win, it's pretty intuitive, no analysis needed, they apply the policies, very good. If they lose, we think they are likely to also be able to apply those policies. Why is this true? 3 reasons. First, because even if they don't win in the US, they can win in many states, and they can get to those federal states and do things that are good to the environment. If it's true what I've just said, that they are more important, even if they apply less policies, but in those states, if they are effective, we think that is a win in and of itself. Secondly, because many of the representatives of the Rep party are also agreeing to this. Hence, if they promote the policy, and they some 5 or 6 of the 52 Senates in the House, probably enact the policies. The comparative, no. Yeah, I like closing.
Trump wants to make America great. Hobbes' logic say that America is just
No.
we think that
No.
that's what we want.
No.
We should even make other
That is the definition, the literal definition of straw manning. What we tell you is that if we have a bad policy, we don't copy the policy because we think it harms the environment and the United States. What we tell you, if they apply this policy, is that they probably convince some rep senates, 5, 10, and they'll enact some policies, even if they win, even if they lose the House. The comparative is that they didn't enact the policies. If they went in the other narrative, they wouldn't ever convince those rep senates because they couldn't enact the policies because they were compromised to the narrative they said in the elections. Probably, if they say in the elections, look, we're going to enact these policies against the environment for America, they wouldn't be able to change that after. The third reason, but why we believe that we'll be able to enact these policies, even if they lose this election, they will win the next one. Or the next one. But this is a debate which is not happening just now. It's a debate that for generations, and the impacts that we gave you are not for the 8 years, are for the whole entirety. Lastly, on COG and their point, we think that automatization is not on class in this debate, basically because it's not related with the employment, but rather the environment, but rather just with employment. We think them on the metric. Thanks.
Thanks very much. To open up the second half of the round, I'd like to invite the member of government.
Ready? Dear panel, I'm afraid, and you should be too. Unemployment is upon us. Harish just won us a couple of more years of debating before the machines are going to take the only thing we know to do. You think that like debaters, many other people in the US and in all developing world are going to lose their jobs very fast, very hurtly. We talk about drivers, we're talking about cashiers, we're talking about waiters, we're talking about many, many other people that are going to lose their job to a stupid machine that can't really understand the arguments. And but it's going to be, but it's getting better really fast. Okay, so 2 points. First of all, why do we think that Democrats actually need specifically to prioritize jobs over environment in order to win? And secondly, why do we think that with the US will go to a big economical problem of unemployment if they will not do it? Just a clarification. we think that the Democrats should prioritize jobs. It doesn't mean that they should just dump oil to the oceans, okay? It means that instead of the stupid Green New Deal, it's going to be the Fox employment. I don't know, Fox. It means that more money and more political power and more thinking and more think tanks are going to talk about jobs, even if we are going to put a lot less of this pressure on the environment. So let's talk about the Democratic campaign, because OG has a brilliant case. Look, Trump offered people a lot of jobs, and if it works, we should do it too and we'll win. OO answered them, but he actually made jobs. There's like 3% of unemployment. It's one of the weakest ever. The problem is that this 3% of unemployment is not distributed equally all over the US. There's huge pockets of unemployment, and specifically in places that Trump created them. What are we talking about? We're talking about, first of all, about growing, people who grow stuff, okay? That because of the tariff with China lost a lot of their ability to sell outside and are now losing their jobs and losing a lot of money and have to fire a lot of people. We're talking about we're talking about the car industry, that because of the tariff on aluminum and steel, it's a lot more expensive. Because of the new NAFTA, it's a lot harder for them to make to make cars, so they shell a lot of people who work for them, and there you get unemployment. We're talking specifically on places in the Rust Belt that Trump magically promised them to give them jobs, but specifically there, the change was the smallest, because most of the jobs was created where the tax cuts was relevant in the where people already had a lot of money, and not in those places. What does that mean? It means that those people are looking for an alternative. Those specifically also in swing states are looking, but right now they're saying Trump tell us he's going to give us jobs. Maybe he didn't, and now he maybe do it later. The Democrats are actively telling us that they're going to put their efforts and money on the environment and not on jobs. They have no choice by voting Trump. When we actually give them a real opportunity and a real choice to vote, a lot of them are going to vote for Democrats, and we really don't need a lot. Hillary did a very bad job. We think that a lot, this message will help the Democrats win. But CG tells us, CO tells us, but people don't listen to them because I know this word, because politicians never change their mind. And we think that we are very, very in the beginning of the Democratic race. There's a lot of candidates. They can still change their message. The big election weren't there yet, and they can actually persuade people to do it. And well, the other option is really bad, and when they think they'll have the alternative, they'll do it. Okay, so why is that important? First of all, because Democrats do a lot of good things. If it's for minorities, if it's for refugees, if it's against misogyny, apparently, if it's so we won't have war with Iran or with North Korea, and because the Republicans will probably, whatever will be even worse on the environment if they will get elected. So even if, so it's a big better. But this debate but we can win this debate even if the Democrats is going to win anyway, because we think that there's a huge problem in the US economy that should be treated. What are we talking about? CG, can I have your case again? CG? First, yes. Thank you. Let's talk about it. Look, automation is happening right now. Debaters are being fired. Okay, but look, we think that right now the best minds in our in society, in Google, in Apple, in Tesla, are working right now. There's already autonomous cars driving around the US and around the world. We think that once the first company will be able to do that, all of the industry will have to go after them, because you will go out of business if you won't move to automation. We think that the same thing happened with other technology. When you have computers that can change your insurance agent or your travel agent or your bank teller, it is very, very easy to replace all those people. And if you're going to be the last bank to do it, or even the second last, you're going to lose a lot of money because the others will be more expensive. It means that the change will come very soon and very, very fast. So why is that so bad? First of all, there's huge unemployment to go on welfare, and on the society, we won't be able to proceed even with the green changes that they want. We can't put a lot of money in the environment when we don't have enough people working and paying taxes and actually giving us the ability to subsidize that. So how do we actually fix that? Because what am I talking about, really? Look, the problem is that, as I told you today, the Democrats are wasting most of their power, political power, and most of their money on the new Green Deal that people hate. and a lot of ineffective way to fight the environment. Some of them effective, most of them probably not work. Okay, I sound like Trump now. Okay, so what do we think? We think that we should put money on stuff like that. First of all, we'll stop subsidizing green energy that is extremely ineffective and it's a lot more automated than regular energy, just make people lose their job actively. Secondly, we'll give money to most of the industry that I talked to before to hire the people and move less to automation. If we won't put a lot of money to those companies to be able to compete with the rest of the world when they will have more automation, they will have to do it. If we are going to help them and subsidize them, even if some of them are polluting, like the car industry, like the energy industry, like the something that I wrote and I can read, all of those places, we think that just by making it slower, by letting people have more time to learn new jobs, by letting more young people get more technology and new jobs that we are going to get, this is the only way that it's not going to be a very big break in a very short of time. We need to help the American people get their new job, they have the ability to sustain themselves, and then with the taxes, with the stability that we'll get, we can handle the environment. Because of all of those reasons, please propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome the Member of Opposition.
Points in my speech. First, tackling directly the main point we got from OG, and we will show you why specific voters turn out to be the most important thing we actually need in order to get the Democratic Party elected, and why we have much more of this on our side, and why it is more important than actually trying to change the opinion of the Republicans, which is unlikely in this debate. Second point, which will make OO completely contingent on us actually answering Idan's rebuttal, saying why we are likely to succeed in actually making environmental regulations pass under our side of this debate. Before that, just like a bit of external rebuttal to CG rebuttal to OG will be. So let's start with the atomization case we got from okay, two answers on that. First, please note, I have no idea why on the comparative I cannot change atomization. I have no idea why it is mutually exclusive in any way in this debate. I have no idea why Democrats cannot fight for this under our side in this debate. It will be very much a shame if this extension will come only on the whip speech. But secondly, and more importantly even note, the jobs that are most prone to atomization are the jobs that, for example, Amichai wants to preserve. Two reasons for that. A, these tend to be low-skill jobs, meaning that it is easier to replace them, right? The jobs in factories that do pollution, etc., are jobs that are much easier to actually replace by machines. But secondly, these are jobs that are very dependent on limited resources. That is, when we are out of oil, out of coal, when we have burned out this forest and we can no longer harvest it, etc. This is the point at which these jobs are no longer feasible, and this is the point where these people become unemployed just in 5 years' time when it's too late for them to find a better replacement. Let's get to the point. No, thank you. First, on voters' turnout. Let's start with actually a weighing of why we think that the most important criteria for actually getting a party elected is voters' turnout rather than changing the opinion of the other side. So first, quite obviously, confirmation bias and tribalism is a thing. I've grown in a place my entire life. I voted for the same party numerous times. It is very hard for me to convince myself I was wrong. People don't usually do this. Secondly, specifically note that most of the most discussed issues in politics are not either of the issues discussed in this debate. We talk about issues, like when we case filed America for this competition, all of you have probably heard about immigration, trade war, Iran, North Korea. Whoever talks about these things, it is so much less important than actually considering what people vote for. And we think that also specifically note that the most important population for us is specifically the youngsters, which have the lowest voting turnout. Why are the young the most important? because they tend to be the most liberal, they tend to be more leaning towards Democrats, and they are the best voter base that we have. But secondly, because they are much more activist, because they tend to actually go on protest, to actually donate, to actually convince others to vote rather than just go to the ballots themselves. And we think that this specific had the lowest voting turnout in the last elections, and we want to look into them. Why is this crucial? Because youngsters usually care less about employment because you often don't have a job yet, or even if they do, it is a more modern job. They don't work in coals any longer. But secondly, because specifically, they tend to be much more puritanic, right? They tend to be much more extreme in their opinions. They are going to be so ashamed of the Democratic Party if it will turn out to be hypocritical, right? If for all of these years they have fought for how we care about climate change, and all of a sudden we are going to flag it out just to be elected, this is the point at which you get exactly what you had in 2016, when people were disappointed of Bernie not being elected because they wanted values compared to actual what is more timid and more keening to the other side, right? This is crucial because note that the entire PM speech is a great framing for 2016 election, not for 2020 election. And we think that this is in this debate. But secondly, let's get more to why we have better voter turnout on our side, just not only because of the youngsters. First, being different. We have a very huge problem of both parties looking the same, fighting for the same things, both leaning towards the center. It is very hard to actually get people motivated to go out of their house when they don't see a difference. B, it is more sensational. You actually see footages of disasters, etc., on the media, etc., and we think that and obviously this is much more like in continuation with what we said in the point in the past, and doesn't present us as like hypocrites. But secondly, let's discuss why we do think that we are likely to actually succeed. We think that we got a nice, like the second point of why we are likely to succeed to make environmental regulations. We think we got a nice analysis from OO saying, compromises, and we can, and maybe we have a majority in the Senate, etc. But we think that there's something crucial to note about this. Why are we so likely to get these compromises? And note, most of these decisions are external affairs rather than internal affairs, right? Meaning that the president decides, not the Senate. Why do we still get it under our side? Because Trump is highly unpopular within the Republican Party. Meaning that Trump actually needs our support in many cases. When he wants to pass things that are internal, that are actually, that he needs the Senate support for, this is the point at which he needs the Democratic senators to support him, because many Republicans have already hated him because of the bad name reputation he gave to the Republican Party, because he's not really a conservative but rather a populist, etc. But secondly, specifically because this is, unlike OO, shows you why this is mutually exclusive, right? Because this is the point at which we actually need to make compromises on socialism, etc., to actually get the better regulations. But secondly, we think it is very, very likely for Trump to be not elected again, and in the era post-Trump, it is very crucial for us to be loyal to a word and to actually fight for environmental regulations. I'm going to explain in a sec why it is likely that Trump won't be elected, but before that, opening.
When the Republican voters vote the Democratic Party with a passion, for unrealistic reasons, their turnout is also lower, therefore we win the elections also lower.
Okay, thank you. You talk about so little people. We do not think that most of the Democratic electorate is actually thinking, they took our jobs. We usually hear the sentence, they took our jobs from Republicans, but B, they obviously care more about other things. They care more about immigration, etc. And most importantly, they care more about trusting us and seeing that we are not liars, that we are not hypocritical, and that we actually stand to our words. The biggest problem is lack of trust. But let's discuss why these elections are different, why we actually have a huge chance to defeat Trump this time. And at this point, we want to do what is more important, which wasn't contested by OG, that is more important, but was just contested whether or not it's feasible. A, note that Hillary was specifically a special candidate, both in terms of she was a woman, she was very elitist, she was very connected to warmongering, etc. And specifically, Sanders has bashed against her very often when many young voters liked Sanders so much and was so disappointed at him not being elected. And she was specifically connected to corruption, leaking of emails, etc. We think that we will have a different narrative now. Secondly, the Mueller report, which obviously made Trump much less popular. The fact that we are so connected to things that even Republicans hate. And thirdly, the fact that even the war, the trade war has failed, the debt to China increasing, the loss of works due to inability to export. Why is this the most important factor? Because note, we think that this is actually a point at which you don't see both parties saying the same, but we actually see, unlike what OG characterized, you actually losing a job. You had a job, and now you lose it because of the trade war, not something future that you can maybe contemplate, etc. Beg you to oppose.
We don't think, as many teams in this debate think, that everything in this world is either black or white. We think that the main problem of most teams in this debate is falling to this logical fallacy. What do we mean by that? Obviously, Trump is going to be elected or not elected not only based on this issue. There is some chance that he's going to be elected without this motion and after this motion. So changing this chance is obviously a relevant clash in this debate, but obviously there is a chance that Democrats are going to win any chance, and therefore we also need to discuss other things in this debate because those things are also extremely relevant. Second of all, when they talk about climate change, they don't ever prove to you why those specific things that they want to pass make any change. Climate change is not like a tipping point of like on one chance 100 million people dying and on the other side of the thing 0 people dying. Doing something is obviously going to create some change, but we didn't get from oppositions what change is going to happen, why this change is important, other than the fact that maybe on the global area climate change might be an important issue. We think that without those things, many of the opposition's case don't stand because it is their burden and the summation speech can't add those specific things. I'm going to talk about 3 things in my speech. Firstly, where do we get more chance the Democrats will win? Secondly, why do we think that caring for employment is extremely important? And thirdly, specifically doing the comparison with the climate change effects that might happen. Let's begin. The rebuttal will be integrated. So first of all, where do we get more chance the Democrats will win? OG tells you that people are like job, and if we tell them that we will give them jobs, they will vote for us, and especially in Rust Belt. We think that OG gave them 2 main responses. First of all, Trump is already talking about that, so we need to compete with him with other messages. We think this claim is silly. Why is that? Obviously, if people agree with this claim, we should say this claim, and then people will agree both with us and the Republicans, and then we'll think, are the other issues that those people talk about are important, and vote based on those issues. This is why everyone is supporting America being great or America having good economy, but then they are talking also about other issues which they differ. We think this doesn't prove anything. Secondly, they tell us, but Trump is very good with that. There is low unemployment. And we think there is where OG really fails, and we add this substantive material. Because we have told you that specifically the low unemployment is not in the specific places that are important for Trump in order to win. And we told you that specifically Trump has made many decisions that made those specific places have actually higher unemployment that we can capitalize on and then get the votes of those specific people. Things like the farmers who have lost their job because of the Chinese tariffs. Things like the car industry who is losing money because aluminum is much more pricey. Things of the people in the Rust Belt that didn't get their jobs back because Trump didn't fulfill his promises. We say that saying specifically and prioritizing this message to those people and not saying to them, you vote for us because we like the Green New Deal, is going to be much more effective in persuading specifically those people to vote for Democrats. And because those are the swing states, it's going to be very important. What would CO says about that? But Republicans will never change their mind. So obviously, we are talking about swing states. People do change their minds. Otherwise, like there will always be only Democrats or Republicans. People always change their mind on some things. And we think that we've given you specific examples to why we think that those specific people, like they voted for Trump because of those issues, will vote for Democrats because of those specific issues after the motion. Then they say, but young people and something like that because they are very liberal. We think they mainly talk about New York and California, which have won by a margin for the Democrats. Maybe there will be less margin on their side of the house, only 1 million people more and not 3 million people more in California. This is okay by us if we win Texas, if we win Iowa, if we win like places that Trump has won before. So we think that we showed that it is much more likely the Democrats win. We fulfill a burden that OG didn't. We think this already puts us in a very good position in this debate. But let's talk about why employment is very important. Because what do we say? There is a problem that is coming towards us that is really critical. CO is trying to claim that it's not going to happen anytime soon. We say that Amazon is already trying to replace many of its workers with robots that are working in the warehouse and like replacing the literally hundreds of thousands of people who work in those places. We say that Uber is working on creating autonomous drivers that will replace literally millions of people like taxi and truck drivers in the US. Those things are coming to us. Then they say, but those issues are not mutually exclusive. We say that obviously when we talk about political power, when you talk about prioritizing things within your campaign, it is mutually exclusive. You can't lobby for both of those things. You can subsidize both of those things in the same effect. We say that therefore, if we show you that those issues are more important, it is enough for us to win this debate. But then they say it's only lousy jobs, you don't really give those people anything. We say that specifically slowing this process is the critical thing that we talk about. Because those people, answering also to OO's claims, are irreversible. When you lose your job and you don't have any other skill and all the low-level jobs are being replaced by robots, you don't have any way to find a new job. And we think that when we tell you that we prioritize finding new places of employment for those specific people, we solve a lot lot of their problems. When you show you that we will only get, let's say, 50,000 people fired a month and not 3 million when all the 3 million truck drivers by Uber will be replaced, it is incredibly important because 3 million people added in the same time is creating massive instability within the US economy, and otherwise we don't get this instability. Those things are incredibly important. Before I move on to the comparison specifically against the climate change, I will take second.
5 minutes of life that they make them choose the worldview that they've grown up on their entire life.
Great. We think that those specific people in the swing states who have changed their mind, have voted Democrats before because they like the beneficial of the welfare of Democrats, but they changed their mind to Trump, this already goes against your argument and already show you that we can make those people go out and vote if we show that our reasons are more important than us. Let's make the comparison. Because when opposition claim that global warming are important, they have many burdens that they haven't fulfilled, and we think that our damages are more strong than that. Firstly, they have to show you that those laws will be passed. We don't think that Trump will go and just pass it because he needs the Senate. Trump had a government shutdown for 3 months and his voters liked it. We think that he will do those things again if he gets more public support. Because of it, they didn't have the opposite analysis. But we think that specifically, things like the Green New Deal will get massive lobbying against those things. We don't think it is just likely that people will vote for those things anyway. Secondly, they need to show us what is the specific change that those rules are going to show. It is very unclear to us why those rules are going to make a significant change, and we think that this is like a thing that their case is based on. Thirdly, what is specifically the extra damage? Because as we've told you, when you harm the economic stability of the US, when you harm the ability of the government to pay for stuff, you already harm the ability of the government to stop the damages of climate change. If climate change happens in some way in both sides of the house, in our side of the house we can build dams because we have more money. Those things are also important to stop specifically the damages of those things. But fourthly, they need to compare with the damages on our side of the house. Because when we tell you that the American economy is going to be slower, when we tell you that millions of people are going to lose their jobs, that means that people are going to starve because they or die out of like medicine. It means that they are buying less from the third world, also like not supporting the economies there because they have much less buying power. We think this also creates massive damages all around the world. Those things were not compared at all by any opposition team. We think this is enough for us that our tangible damage wins this debate. Please support.
Thank you very much. Let's welcome the last speaker of the round, the opposition whip.
Two clashes in my speech. First of all, will we get elected? Second of all, an environment. One thing I like to note on will we get elected. Swing states doesn't mean that Republicans there are more likely to change their minds. Rather than, there's a relatively similar amount of Democrats and Republicans. Therefore, oftentimes they can swing to each side according to voter turnout. Let's continue. So, the thing we get from OG is, now we'll get jobs about coal, therefore we get elected. First thing I'd like to note is, just like a couple of mitigations, the overwhelming majority of these industries weren't specifically because of like environmental regulation. Coal was simply no longer economically viable because many other countries were supplying it much more cheaply, and that's why they need active subsidies in order to reinnovate that economy. It's unclear to me why that's in any way connected to the motion. Second of all, even in the places where it is mutually exclusive, you don't have to support environment and therefore literally no job. You can simply create other jobs in that place that aren't coal, such as bringing in companies they'll create other factories, such as incentivization, all these things. Why does it have to be specifically this? Third of all, please note, we already explained that even though employment is incredibly important to them, there are many other things that are also incredibly important to them. Things like the fact that there were oftentimes like tribal voting, the fact that their entire family has voted for them, the fact that there are simply many, many important issues such as abortion, such as immigration, such as women's rights, such as like they're tired of all the the like political correctness and like caring about immigration and less about Americans. These are all things that are unlikely to change. Are unlikely to change their mind anyway. The fact that we are they like us more on one issue doesn't mean that they like us more on literally all the other things where we're still vastly different. Lastly, please note, and this is crucial, we simply explain that literally no one would be convinced by this nonsense, okay? No one would be convinced by that turn. We talk about the fact that now literally every single Republican Party and Republican candidate would laugh at our faces and point at the fact that we literally changed our minds after two presidential debates where we literally emphasized specifically the environmental issue. Candidates like Bernie Sanders and stuff literally ran only upon it and also forced candidates like Joe Biden to also focus a lot of their debates on this. Second of all, the fact that a lot of prominent Democratic figures would be disappointed and would actively point at our hypocrisy and tell us that we're being stupid, right? The fact that they'll say, look, you're surrendering to the Republican Party, you're surrendering to their message. Literally, the last message in the last presidential debate is we don't have to sacrifice our values simply because the Republican Party has decided to. It goes exactly to their narrative. Third of all, the fact that they admit themselves the most likely candidate is Joe Biden. The majority of the unemployed workers literally hate the establishment, and you don't get any more establishment than Joe Biden, right? But lastly, please note the fact that they're incredibly untrusting of the system, which means it's incredibly likely for them to be extra susceptible to any kind of thing like you being like hypocritical, you changing your values. Specifically because, and this is incredibly important, they understand that for years they were not in the political interest because it was much more beneficial to support globalization, to ruin their industries so richer cities can get cheaper products. The moment that they see the Democratic Party, for now, it's beneficial for them to support them, but maybe in 1 year, in 1 month, in 2 years, it will no longer be beneficial. What guarantee do they have that they'll still support the exact same values? It's incredibly unlikely for them to trust it. Then this brings me to our extension, right? Where we literally give you a lot of structural analysis for why the overwhelming important thing in this election is voter turnout. Two initial weighings on why that's true. First of all, we already say that even if you can technically change the minds of Republicans, it's significantly easier to simply convince people to go outside. The number of steps you have to make to literally decide to simply go out and vote, and the number of steps you have to make to literally change your political view are entirely different. But the much better weighing, please note, is 53% of all Americans did not vote, while 24% of Americans voted Republican in the last election. The pool of people that we can convince to go out and vote, specifically on these issues, is much, much bigger. Therefore, voter turnout is a much bigger issue. Let's explain why. No, you got your chance. Let's explain why specifically. The fact that oftentimes it's specifically young people that are much more pure in their opinions, much more ideological, which means they're much more susceptible to things like any kind of change, like any kind of hypocritical, any kind of that. The fact that oftentimes these young people simply do not care about unemployment. Now, it's not just young people. The majority of Democratic voters, even in swing states, are in the richer areas, are in the main cities. This is where unemployment isn't rampant. This is where there is employment, which means they're much less likely to care about these issues, even within the swing states. Third of all, the fact that oftentimes they are incredibly loyal to candidates like Bernie Sanders, like the Vasquez. And what literally happened last election is huge proportions of these people, because they were disappointed by Hillary, which they perceived as not supporting any of one of these values, are unlikely to support them. Lastly, let's talk about environment for a second, because one thing I like to note about automation. Look, to this point, it's unclear to me how is this in any way in the debate. First of all, they literally have no analysis why the specific political capital that is demanded for automation is the exact political capital that will be demanded to get environment. How are they any way mutually exclusive? It's really unclear to me. Second of all, they missed our second answer, which was literally, look, preserving these environment, these employments is likely to be counter effective for these things. The fact is, oftentimes, first, sure. I already answered all of this. They're unlikely to change their minds. We can support job creation in different ways. All of this was answered. Look, lastly, this is our point. We give you two structural analysis that weren't answered. The first is we're simply very likely to win this election. The fact that Mueller report significantly hurt Trump's support percentage. The fact that the trade war, as they said themselves, really hurt a lot of Americans that trusted Trump. The fact that oftentimes the main reason we lost in the last election, we had the majority, simply a lot of people didn't go out in the end simply because they were sure Hillary would win. All of these things change. We simply think we're very likely to win in general. But second of all, lastly, why is this important? I don't accept those things where it's impossible for us to understand, therefore it cannot be fulfilled. The fact that air pollution, the fact that water pollution, the fact that things like fracking really screw over a lot of people, really raise chances of health issues, of cancer, of harm to your heart, of a lot of conditions that are really important. They harm the health of specific environments that are harmed the most. For all these reasons, I beg you to oppose.